he stood on a crate where it was very high up. He was a tall man too, and it just flashed through my mind that nobody else could look into his list because he was so high up, and not even the controlling officer, who was probably a German or a Hungarian Nazi. And it flashed through my mind, he might have a list of Swedish opera singers, as far as I know. It were heart-stopping minutes, heart-stopping seconds until he found my name. And yes, he ticked it. And he said, yes, this man has got a Swedish document. So the guard said, you can stand apart.
At any moment, Wallenberg's bluff could be called. But he keeps his nerve and inspects the pieces of paper thrust into his hands. Wallenberg confronts the Nazi guards, saying the people are all Swedes and cannot be sent away. With these simple acts, Wallenberg saves hundreds of lives in one day. But his actions quickly come to the attention of Adolf Eichmann. Thousands of lives hang in the balance. Fall 1944. The Soviet army steamrolls through eastern Hungary toward Budapest. Hitler's armies fall back as his empire crumbles. But the Nazis are intent on carrying out their genocide of the Jews. Adolf Eichmann, in charge of the final solution in Hungary, forces the remaining Jews on death marches toward the Austrian border.
We were so tired that we fell down and we slept on the earth. And in the night it was frost, and in the morning we got up and many of the women were dead. We got every third or fourth day something, soup or something. And the worst of all was that they didn't give us to drink. And you know, to march and not to drink was the most terrible thing. And wherever we went, we felt the hatred of the people. We couldn't feel any sympathy from the village people. They cried and they told, kill all these Jewish women.
But Raoul Wallenberg and his assistant Per Unger learn of the death march. They organize a convoy of trucks to catch up with the march. Wallenberg hastily hands out Swedish passes. 300 Jews are saved.
So they told me it is Raoul Wallenberg, a Swede, who wants to help us. And he told, look, I want to save all of you. If I could, I would save all of you. But I can save only a very few people. I have only a number of people that I can save. So please forgive me, but I must save the young ones, because I want to save a nation. And these words I can never forget.
Eichmann is furious. He threatens to have Wallenberg shot. Wallenberg organizes a dinner with Eichmann in Budapest. Swedish diplomat Lars Berg accompanies him.
We were sitting there very pleasantly, drinking coffee and talking like in any other party. And then Wallenberg started really to go against Eichmann about Nazism, and that this was the end of Nazism, would be the end of Hitler, the end of Eichmann. I had the impression that night that Eichmann didn't want to deal about his own life, and that he said he was enjoying this power and the good things that women and wines were brought from France. I don't know, everything was possible at that time. He was just going to stand up right there, and he declared in my presence that when the Russians come, they will shoot me. I'm the head of the SS in Hungary, and I will be given no pardon. And then he said very quietly, very politely to Wallenberg that, well, even if I think you're right. Now, don't think that we are friends. You have a Swedish diplomatic passport, but that is not sure it will protect you. Even a neutral diplomat can meet with an accident. After that, Eichmann rose and very politely, it was just as we were sitting there having a nice evening together, thanked for the dinner and bowed and left. A couple of days later, a huge German truck rode right into the car of Wallenberg. And the car was completely destroyed, except Wallenberg was not in the car.
December 1944. Budapest is under siege by Soviet forces. Artillery and aircraft bombard the city. Eichmann flees to Vienna. Before he goes, he orders 70,000 Jews in a Budapest ghetto to be massacred.
At the very end, when the Nazis, the Hungarian Nazis, became very desperate, they decided to mass murder the people there. And there were 70,000 people in that general ghetto. And when Wallenberg heard that, he sent a message to the German general, one of those who were remaining there with his troops, an SS general, Schmidhuber. And he told him that if you don't stop this now, I can guarantee that you will be hanged after the war as a war criminal. And the German, he understood that very well, so he stopped it. And so you can say that Wallenberg, in doing this, he saved another 70,000 people.
January 1945. Hitler sends in the 6th Panzer Army as reinforcement. With Budapest under siege, the Hungarian Nazi Party goes on the rampage. They slaughter Jews, including children. Amid the chaos, Wallenberg risks his life. Hitler's troops fail to reach the city. On January 13th, the anarchy ends. Soviet troops reach Budapest. The Nazi regime is at an end. It should be a time of celebration, especially for Raoul Wallenberg, who risked his own life in order to save the lives of Hungarian Jews. But just 4 days later, Raoul's life would take a horrific turn. January 17th, Wallenberg and his driver Wilma Schlangfelder drive to Debrecen to negotiate food for the thousands of Hungarian Jews sheltered by him. At first, he is escorted by Russian soldiers. At some point, the guards are replaced by officers from the NKVD, the Soviet secret police. It is the last official sighting of Wallenberg. He never arrives in Debrecen.
And he told one of his closest men working with him that he was leaving, but he didn't know if it was as a prisoner or as a guest of the Russians.
Over 50 years later, people still ask, what happened to Raoul Wallenberg? Why did the Soviet secret police arrest a neutral citizen doing good for his fellow man? Part of the answer lies in the chaos at the end of World War II. In 1944, it is clear that Germany is doomed. But out of the anarchy, the Soviet Union emerges as the strongest power in Eastern Europe. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin is determined to establish his own Soviet-dominated empire. With the United States and Britain advancing from the West, it is clear that Europe will be divided in two. The Cold War has effectively begun, and it is about to claim one of its first victims. Russia and the United States are already deeply suspicious of each other. The communists in Hungary cannot believe that Wallenberg is driven purely by goodwill. They know he is receiving financial aid from the American War Refugee Board. This must be a cover for spying.
My personal opinion is this, that Wallenberg, as soon as the Russians, he got in contact with the Russians, he told them that he wasn't only a Swedish diplomat, but he was sent by President Roosevelt himself. He was working with American money to save Jewish lives. I think that that's why he disappeared, that it wasn't good at that time to declare that you worked for the American.
Soviet documents allege that in February 1945, Wallenberg is transferred to cell 123 at Lubyanka prison in Moscow, the interrogation center for all political enemies of the Soviet Union. His driver is held in another cell. Wallenberg is charged with spying. He requests a public trial. The Russians refuse and keep him in solitary confinement. Wallenberg's family is desperate to contact him.
When our chief of mission to Moscow, Söderblom, left Moscow, he brought up the Wallenberg case with Stalin. And Stalin wrote down the name Wallenberg, obviously with the intention to inquire about it. And then it's anybody's guess whether he really took this matter up with Beria, whom he met rather often. But if he did, and if these two gentlemen agreed that there was no reason, at least for the present, to send Wallenberg home, Wallenberg's fate may have been decided for many years to come.
But the Soviets dramatically changed their story. It will not be the first time. August 1947, Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Vyshinsky tells the United Nations that they do not know of Wallenberg. He is not in the Soviet Union. The Soviets speculate that he has probably been murdered by Gestapo agents. But the mystery of Wallenberg's disappearance will not die. The Soviet Union expects the rest of the world to forget him, but they will not. Raoul Wallenberg's mother will not stop until she finds her son. In 1947, the Soviets tell her that they have no idea where he is, but she refuses to give up. For the next 10 years, she spearheads a family investigation. The Swedish government also launches an investigation. It produces statements from 19 prisoners who allege that they have had contact with Wallenberg in Soviet prisons. In 1957, one newly released Soviet prisoner states that Wallenberg is in Vladimir prison near Moscow. But at the height of the Cold War, Sweden, a neutral power, has little international leverage to force the Soviet Union to act. It can only politely request information. On February 6, 1957, the requests are finally answered. Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko states that a thorough search has finally settled the matter. He claims that Wallenberg died of a heart attack in Lubyanka prison in July 1947 at age 35. But there are no witnesses, no body, and no death certificate. His family and colleagues aren't convinced. Around the world, people begin free Wallenberg campaigns. They believe he is still alive. In 1959, they are given hope. Abram Kalinski, a Polish army officer, is released from Vladimir prison. He says he knew Wallenberg as a fellow prisoner.
I saw him from a window, and before that I had already seen him in the Verkhovalsk prison, between 51 and 53. I met him on the way to the bath. I saw him during walks. and former cellmates of Wallenberg came to me and pointed out that this was Wallenberg, that same Swede who saved Jews and who was inside for alleged espionage.
But that is it. The Cold War is about to enter one of its most threatening phases. Tensions are high between the West and the Soviet Union.